Okay, I'm gonna talk about my generator for just a minute, and then I'm gonna show you how you could build this very same generator for a lot less money than I spent on mine. But let's just talk about it. Um, I've got two pieces of plastic here and two pieces of plastic here. You could just as easily use wood. Okay. With mine, I cut holes in the outside piece of plastic that go all the way through, but the inside plastic I cut holes part of the way through and left a piece of plastic there so that the coil bobbin would go in and hit it and stop. But the core of the coil could stick out through this 3/4 inch hole right here. And if you look behind it, there's the magnets on the rotor back in there. So they're going to go right past that hole. Um, that's my machine. It's run by a motor. It's got a bearing block out here. It's got a bearing block here. Now and it does exactly what I want it to do. It's perfect for what I wanted because I wanted to be able to take a coil, stick it in between these two things right here, and still get it in the hole. That way I could take coils in and out of the machine on both sides, and I could test different coils. I could do all kinds of stuff. This was my test bed for my setup. And so it's a long unit that you don't necessarily have to have. Okay, so let's talk about what you could do to build basically the same thing a lot cheaper. The first thing I would look at is this. This is 6 pieces of PVC coupler that are epoxied together. PVC couplers you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. Every one of them has a ridge in the center so that the pipe goes in and hits it, and then the pipe comes in from this side and hits it. You have to grind that ridge out of there, and then they work perfectly for these coils. Here's a coil bobbin. It's got the core sticking out 1/4 inch out of the bobbin. They go in, but they're kind of tight going in there. So what I do before I wind the wire on them is I go ahead and sand right around this rim just a little bit on both of them until they'll slide in and out of this real easily. Okay, so once you put this unit together, that'll hold 6 of your coils on one side of the rotor. Then you make a second one that holds 6 of your coils on the other side of the rotor. All right, you put a square piece of plastic on the inside of this one that's 1/4 inch thick so that when your bobbin sticks it through here, the core of the bobbin sticks through and is flush with the plastic or with the 1/4 inch thick piece of wood. On the back side, you want a 3/4 inch piece of wood because you want something that's really strong that you can put, because it's actually going to be, it'll be where this piece of plastic is. You'll have a piece of 3/4 inch wood where this piece of plastic is, and you can put L brackets here to mount it to your base plate. And you want that strong construction. So when you have these two set up like this, with L brackets here to hold it, L brackets here to hold it, and you can put all thread all the way through all 4 pieces here, end up at the top, and then you can put nuts on the inside to hold this the right distance apart. You can put nuts on the outside to pull it together, and it'll be squeezing on these, so you won't even need these aluminum spacers like I've got in mine. So that would give you your mounts for your coils. Okay, my setup was designed so that I could slide a coil in here and get it into this hole so that I could test different coils and configurations and everything else. But once you've got the right coil and you know what coil to build for this thing, I would go ahead and get rid of this bearing mount out here. And since you're going to have a piece of 3/4 inch wood, I would get one of those flange bearings that goes right here that has metal plate on it with 4 places to bolt it, and I would bolt it right on the back of this so that the shaft came right out through the bearing, and you could put a nut right on the outside. So you'd eliminate all of this. You can do the same thing on this side. Have the shaft come out through the flange bearing, put a nut on the outside, and you eliminate all this stuff. If you put hubs on both sides of the rotor, you don't need this big plastic spacer like I have on my machine. Okay, you can get rid of that. So let's talk about the rotor. You're going to want a 3-piece rotor. You want a rotor that's got holes in it for the magnets, whatever size magnets you choose to use. The magnets go in a rotor. Then you put a 1/16 inch piece of plastic in here, 1/16 inch thick plastic that sits down on top of this in a circle. Then you put your second rotor on top with magnets in it. The magnets on the top rotor are attracted to the magnets on the bottom rotor, and through that piece of plastic, and everything gets held together by the magnets. So that's the way I would make the rotors. Then you can epoxy everything in place. Now, I run my machine with an MY1020 unmodified Razor scooter motor until I get everything working. And then I have another Razor scooter motor that is a MAP modified motor, and I put it right in its place. It's the exact same size. It bolts right in exactly the same place. If you can afford 2 motors, run with an unmodified motor until you get everything working. Then take the motor off, modify it, and put it back on here. What you want to get out of this system is you want to learn how to run this motor on the modified motor on the 3-battery system, turning this thing and generating power out of 1 or 2 coil pairs. And by that I mean when you have one of these right here holding coils and one of them over here holding coils, you'll have a pair of coils across from each other. The motor will only turn this with about 3 coils in the setup if you have large magnets that are generating power the way you should have, okay? And by large, I don't necessarily mean in diameter, like those were 2-inch magnets. I have rotors with smaller magnets, 3/4, but they're thicker, and so my space in here is wider because 3/4 and 3/4, I have a 1.5-inch thick just magnets, so my rotor has to be way thicker than this rotor is. So you're going to want to see how much power you get out of your system and make adjustments until you get the amount of power that you want using whatever rotor you want with this setup until you get the power that you want. And then you can go to the putting the modified motor in here, and you will have a system that's over Unity. The next step, once you get all that working, once you see that this thing is going to work and it's really going to do everything I say it's going to do, then the next step is cut this shaft off right here, get rid of all of this. You're going to have the bearing here, like I said, a bearing here and a bearing on the backside, and all you'll have is a shaft that goes from right about here to right about here, and it goes into the bearings with nuts on the outside to hold the rotor so it doesn't go back and forth. And then you will learn to run this as a motor generator, and you won't need this motor, and you won't have to worry about lock, because every time a magnet lines up with a coil core, you're going to fire it as a motor, and the rest of the time it's going to be a generator. So, you know, that's the system that you want to eventually end up with, and you will do that on a 3-battery system. But first you want to learn all this stuff. You want to learn how the 3-battery system works, all the ins and outs of it, how it functions, rotating the batteries, all of that stuff. You want to learn all of that before you take the time and the effort and the money to wind the rest of those coils, because the cost of winding 12 coils for this setup is pretty close to $1,000 to have all those coils wound. So, you know, you want to make sure you know what you're doing before you do the whole thing. But anyway, that is what I would put together if I were you, and I think that's the cheapest and easiest way for you to do it, and have a system that not only will work with an off-the-shelf motor, but you can put a Razor scooter motor in here, and then when the time comes, you just cut the shaft, and you got everything you need right here to really do what you want to do, and you don't have to build a whole new system. You've got it. It's all here. It's all in one place.